good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. We are coming off the Canelo Crawford weekend, which is a spectacular event. There were some good fights or okay fights on the card. Lester Martinez versus Billy was an action-packed fight, like I said it would be. They did their thing, and in the end, it was a draw. That was mostly a fight where it could have went anyway. It could have went for either guy. But let's just get back. Let's not get back. Let's get into the main event, and let's backtrack. Let's talk about early on dealing with Bud Crawford, right? I've been saying for years this is a kid that has gone through so much trial, tribulation, and travesty in his life. And in a situation like that where you have a guy who's dealt with a lot and he becomes disciplined and he's able to discipline his violence, he's looking for the moment in time where he can define himself. He's not only just trying to define himself, he's always looking to rise to the occasion. And what I'm talking about is early on, growing up in Omaha, Nebraska, Bud's mother would pay kids $10. And she would pay them $10 at a time, 2, 3 guys, sometimes 5 guys, sometimes 10 guys at a time, throughout the course of a day or a week, And she would pay them to beat Bud up. Consequently, Bud never found the person that could whoop him. And when Bud found out that he was not just being challenged, but his mother was doing it to him, for young men, like including myself, it lights a fire, and it provides you with a rage and an ability to always want to rise to the occasion, to always meet a challenge, to always accept a challenge and go to it and find out what's there. So whether or not she knew it, which I believe she did, the same way my mother did, she knew she lit a fire under him. And she knew she was trying to keep him out of trouble or keep him alive. And in certain situations like that, when you're growing up in a black neighborhood and your father isn't around all the time or at all because he may be locked up in jail or he just may not want to be involved, right? You leave a young man who has the ability to do something, but he doesn't have the correct discipline. Now, I don't know much about Canelo, but I do know Canelo grew up with like 5 or 6 siblings, 7 siblings. He grew up in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, right? And I'm sure he went through some of the same things because Canelo turned pro at 15 years old, I believe. Now, where can you do that in America? Nowhere. You can only do that in places like Mexico and maybe a couple other places in the world. In America, you have to be 18 or 19 years old to turn pro in boxing, which is crazy when you think about it because most people can buy cigarettes before they can get a drink in America. You have to be 21 or older to drink, 18 to join the military, and 18 to box. So if you think about that, that's kind of crazy and wild. But getting back to Bud Crawford, right? He goes through all these trials and tribulations. By the time he's in his teenage years, he's already boxing. He's going to the Junior Olympics and Golden Glove or Junior Silver Gloves. He's doing all these different things. And because he's partly still trying to fill this void in his life and find out what the biggest challenge is, he's not left. He's hanging out with his friends. I think they were playing dice. Or some group of guys, I ain't gonna say his friends. And he won the dice game. And after he won part of the dice game, he went back to his car, he drove off, and he parked somewhere. After he parked and sat there and counted his cash, some guys rode up on the side of his vehicle while he was sitting in the back seat, I believe, or from what I understand, I don't believe, from what I understand, and they shot the back of the car up while he was sitting in there counting his cash. Bud Crawford took a bullet to the head. He woke up from that in the car, and he may have been in his driver's side seat. So we'll just say he was in a car. They shot up his car, and he drove himself to the hospital. There aren't too many guys who could survive a bullet to the back of the head and drive themselves to the hospital. So again, we're talking about a guy who's filled with rage and anger and pain. He always wants to prove himself and rise to the challenge. And again, this is why I always say it's important to have a two-parent household, because the father is the nature of the child and the mother is the nurture of the child. And the father being the nature of the child, he's the one who planted the seed. That's all his DNA, from his brain down through his spine, going out through his nutsack, shooting out into the woman who is the one that's going to nurture this child. And you need both of them. And sometimes when you don't have a child that has a father, that discipline isn't there. But for some reason, God, the universe, Allah, whatever you believe it is, or life, or his journey, put good people around Bud. Good people around Bud, like Saul. You had Coach Red. You also had, of course, Bo Mack, who was in his corner and made sure that they guided Bud to the right place. And now what we're looking at is a guy who's a world champion. He has 42 wins or 43 wins in total, with 31 knockouts and not one loss on his record. This is a kid who grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and learned the ins and outs of boxing. When he was done with the amateurs, he wasn't highly recruited. No one was really looking at him. While this was happening, he watched a bunch of other guys come and go. He watched a bunch of other guys who were not as good as he was get a look that they should not have gotten. And then he finally signs with Top Rank. Along his journey, he meets Tim Bradley, right? Tim Bradley invites him into this camp. Tim Bradley, if you saw what he said recently, he said, "Man, I invited this kid out. I'm on top of the world at the time. I'm in superstar fights. I'm getting paid well, and they invite this kid named Terrence Crawford into my camp." He said Terrence shows up by himself. By himself. They said he was in a corner. He wasn't laughing or joking with nobody. He wrapped his hands up, and when it was his turn to get in the ring, he said, "I never seen a guy just show up like that, regardless of my status or my money, and put a whooping on me while I'm in camp." And they said he didn't just do it once. He came back and he did it the next day. And he said, "Man, who the hell is this kid?" He said, "So that's why I started talking to him." And they said he said he sat with Terrence when nobody else was around, or in between sparring sessions or however it went. Ooh, excuse me. Excuse me. That was me yawning. He said he sat with Bud and he told him, "Hey man, you just not no regular fighter. You're a champion. It's all in there." He said, "You got everything. You got all the tools." He said, "I've been watching." He said, "Of course I've seen you spar." He said, "But you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, and there's no reason for them not to make you champion." So from what I think that he was the one that introduced Bud to Bob Arum. Or maybe that's when Bud decided to go get with somebody that's a little bit higher up. Because I think he had Cameron Duncan at one point in time. Rest in peace to Cameron Duncan, but Cameron Duncan wasn't always the best guy with fighters. And I've, for those who don't know, I've interviewed some people on my podcast. And, there are some that just had a different perspective on him. So with that said, Bud moves on. He gets with Bob Arum. Bob Arum is trying to get him the correct fights. But before that happens, or while that was happening, Bud ends up fighting a guy named Bradis Prescott. Bradis Prescott was supposed to fight another guy. And for those who don't know, Bradis Prescott was a mean guy, man. I think he was a Cuban or Puerto Rican fighter. I just say Latino, right? Very good fighter. All right, he knocked out Amir Khan. Had Amir Khan seeing stars. He was a pretty good fighter, and Bud took that fight. I think last minute with like a couple weeks notice. Showed up a little bit, out of weight, of course, because he wasn't supposed to be fighting that guy. And he won that fight. Bud won that fight convincingly. I think it was 7-5 or 8-4. But he kept Bradis Prescott at the end of a jab. He threw combinations. Bradis Prescott was known for pressuring guys and getting guys, whooping on guys and getting guys knocked out. That was a fight, I believe that was on HBO. You can go YouTube it. Bradis Prescott versus Bud Crawford. It was it was a defining moment for Bud to let him know, oh man, I can beat these guys. I can beat these guys. They ain't better than me. But on his way up there, Bud was already tearing shit up. He was already tearing shit up, So then after that fight, Bud started getting more attention on the HBO circuit, and then Bob Arum grabbed him. And then he went through this lull where no one wanted to fight him. So at 135, he did his damage. He fought Gamboa. Everybody said Gamboa wasn't this, Gamboa wasn't that. He wasn't as good as he was when he was once before. That's not his fault. It's not his fault that Gamboa was uberly or extraordinarily talented, but he wasn't disciplined. It's not Terrence's fault that Gamboa was like that. Yuriokis Gamboa was like that. It's not his fault that Gamboa, just was so cocky that he didn't do the work. And like they always say, and I've said before, I've said it in gyms, I've seen it in gyms, it's been the same thing. Hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. Hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard. It's always been that way, and it's always going to stay that way. It doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter how talented you are. If you aren't willing to put in the work and put in the time in the gym, there's always going to be someone, no matter how talented you are, there's always another guy, another gal that will always outwork you. Just because you're talented doesn't mean anything. If you're not disciplined and you can't put it together, it doesn't mean a damn thing. And that's just the truth of the matter. It never means anything if you can't put it together. So as Bud progresses, he goes from 135, he moves up to 140, and he ends up getting 2 belts off of 2 different champions at 140. Oh, he was also champion at 135, I believe. I know. I think. I ain't gonna say I believe. I think he was champion at 135. He moved up to 140. And then at 140, he beat 2 guys, or I think he beat 1 guy who had 2 belts. And then the other guy, Julius Ndongo, had the other 2 belts. Him and Julius Ndongo fight while he was under Bob Arum in top rank banner. And he beat Julian Ndongo, knocked him out with a body shot while they were exchanging punches in a sequence, and Bud knocked him down with a body shot, and Ndongo couldn't recover. So he fights Ndongo. People say, oh, Ndongo was a decent fighter. He wasn't the best. He was a world champion, all right? Why don't you guys go fight Gamboa? Why don't you guys go fight Ndongo and see what happens to you? And I'm quite sure it's not going to turn out the same for you. Boom. Bud moves up to 147. He's calling out all the champions at 147. When he was at 140, I was already saying it's only a matter of time before he gets to Errol Spence fight. It's only a matter of time before he gets the Keith Thurman fight. It's only a matter of time before he gets the Danny Garcia fight, because I thought he would have been fought Danny Garcia. I thought that would have been one of his first fights at 147 or at 140. Not 147. Yeah, at 147. I thought he would have fought Danny Garcia at 140 or Adrian Broner, who I thought would have been a bigger test for him at 140. But Adrian Broner success took him and moved him along a lot faster. So Bud moves up to 140. And he has trouble getting some of these major fights. Errol Spencer's fighting the Kell Brooks. He's fighting the Sean Porters. He's fighting the Danny Garcias. Bud isn't. Bud has to get guys on his record that everybody knew that Bud could beat, but that's not Bud's fault. And the reason why it's not Bud's fault is because it's the promoter's job to make sure that you are seen and heard. However, it's your job to make sure, as a fighter, you're seen and heard too. And it's not necessarily a problem, but Bud is one of those guys like me. I lead by example. I don't do a lot of talking. I do my talking in whatever it is I'm good at. And sometimes I'm not going to do no talking in that. I'm just going to perform. I'm going to perform well, and I'm going to get out your way. And that's going to be my example. And that's the type of person that Bud is. Bud ain't the type of person to be bragging and boasting about anything. He just gets competitive. He wants to win, and after he wins, he lets you know that he's one of them guys, and he keeps on going. And at that point in time, for Bud, it becomes hard for him to get fights at 147. He can't get Danny Garcia. He can't get Keith Thurman. He can't get Errol Spence. He can't get any of the top guys. He doesn't want to fight Sean Porter because Sean Porter at the time is really his friend. You know, they came up through the amateurs and everything like that. And he's hung around Sean's family. So he's trying his best to get these fights. He started calling these guys out. He started showing up at the events, you know, paying attention to what they're doing, calling them out, saying I can beat them. You know, those guys would be easy fights, which they would have been. Either he would have beat the hell out of Danny Garcia or knocked him out. Brandon Rios, he would have done the same thing to him. That would have been easy. That would have been a spectacular knockout. Also, the Pacquiao fight, that falls through. He doesn't get the Pacquiao fight, and we already know why. No one wants to take a chance on Bud. That's all it really is. No one really wants to take a chance on a guy who can hurt you, beat you up, knock you out, and send you to the hospital no matter what happens, you know? No one wants to take a chance on a guy that has a bigger toolbox and is training to define himself in his career and step up and meet every challenge. No one wants to take on the guy that really wants to go out there and give it his all just to prove to himself, to prove it to his family, and prove it to the world that I am one of them guys, you know. And it's that burning fire of rage and pain and anger that makes you want to do it. No one wants to do it though. And because no one wants to do it, he has to fight these guys everybody calls B fighters or C fighters, tomato cans or whatever. But he fights those guys anyway. And he puts more guys on his record, you know, on his way to fighting Errol Spence. Boom. Errol Spence gets into a car accident. Buzz immediately when he's at an event or he's in a gym training, they say, "Do you still want the Errol Spence fight?" Bud says, "No, I don't want the fight no more." And they said, "Why not, Bud?" Bud says, "Because if I beat him, y'all gonna say he was in a bad car accident. He went through the windshield of a car, landed on his face, and y'all gonna say he was just easier to beat." He said, "I wanted him 5 years ago. Where was he 5 years ago when I was calling him out? Where was any of these guys 5 years ago when I was calling them out?" Well, like I said before, if they ain't calling you out, it usually means that they don't want no smoke. And they'll make up excuses to make sure that you don't get that fight. Their excuse is that Bud was on the other side of the street, and that's a lie. It's just two different promotional banners getting together and putting the money together for the fight. and saying, hey, I put up this much, can you put up that much, or whatever. And they resolve the issue. And it's happened in the past where promoters from different sides of the street, as they call it, excuse me, or were calling it, it's just two guys getting together and saying, hey, let's put the fight together and make money and make these guys rich. And we'll get rich too. Which didn't happen. It didn't happen until after Errol Spence had been in a couple more car accidents, and people found out that he hadn't been the most stable person, and he might have been drinking. Might have been. I don't know. I'm not in his camp. Anyway, they fight, right? Well, before they fight, Errol comes back and he fights Danny Garcia, which was a beautiful boxing exhibition during COVID. And he whooped Danny Garcia, you know. He gave Danny Garcia a good whooping. He ain't like beat him up too bad, but it was just a boxing lesson, which was crazy because you didn't think that he would be able to stay disciplined enough to outbox Danny. You thought he would just go in and try to mow Danny down, and he didn't. He boxed behind his jab. He was able to counter Danny and move Danny to where he wanted him to. And it was an impressive fight. But one thing I did realize about that fight is Danny Garcia isn't much of a mover. All right? He's not. He doesn't move too much. He don't do a lot of moving. He's usually sitting there waiting to throw a counter hook or a counter right hand. That's just the way he does things. Boom. Errol wins that fight. Then he goes on to fight Ugas. And he goes on a fight, or did he fight Sean Porter before the car accident? Either way, he bounces back, and then he has to take some time off. Errol ends up taking the time off during the time where he takes the Pacquiao fight, right? He gets the Pacquiao fight, and then he has an eye injury that no one knew about, not even himself. Errol still wanted to fight, even with one eye. Because he wanted that Pacquiao fight. He wanted to put that on his resume. But so did Bud. Bud wanted that fight as well. Boom. He misses that fight because of eye injury. Keith Thurman goes in and fights Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao puts on a hell of a show, beating Keith Thurman. What is Bud doing? Fighting the guys that he's supposed to fight at the time. We get to the moment where Errol Spence is supposed to fight Bud. The fight takes place. I started looking at the two fighters. Everybody is saying that Errol is going to win this fight easily. Errol is just going to mow Crawford down. He's just going to beat Bud up, and he's going to knock Bud out. The whole time I'm going, Terrence has a toolbox. He has plenty of ways that he can beat Errol Spence. There's no way that Errol is going to go in there with those two different techniques that he have, those two different styles. He's going to beat Bud. People kept saying, oh, man, you tripping, man. You tripping. Bud ain't fought nobody. I kept telling them, it's not that Bud ain't fought nobody. It's that they do not want to fight Bud. No, that ain't what's happening. It's because he's on the other side of the street. No, it's not. Those are false narratives brought to you by the people who are pulling for Bud, pulling for Errol, and they don't like Terrence. They don't like Terrence Crawford. So they all spreading these same stupid-ass narratives to say, hey, we don't like dude, and dude don't give us interviews, so we gonna just say that he's scared and all this other stuff. People bought into that. I didn't. Because the truth of the matter is, if you smell pussy, you knock it off, right? You knock it out. You go to it. You eat it up, right? He had a belt. I think he had the WBO or the WBA belt. And nobody ran over there to take that belt from Terrence. So if he was so pussy, why ain't nobody go take that belt from him? No one did. No one stepped up. They left Terrence alone. And he went out and did his thing, right? He fought whoever he was going to fight. And gets up to the Errol Spence fight. And I wasn't shocked when that fight was stopped in the 9th round. And the reason why I'm not shocked is because it don't matter if it would have been 2 years ago, 4 years ago, or 6 years ago. The outcome to that fight, to me, would have been the same. No matter the year, no matter the time. Bud Crawford would have whooped Errol Spence, and that's just me talking. That's me speaking up, saying that I believe at any point in time when Errol Spence would have fought Terrence Bud Crawford, Bud Crawford would have just won that fight easily. 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 You would have just seen a sharper guy, a more vicious guy, and he would have got that. He would have got off early and often. He would have used both styles, and he may have just stayed southpaw just to prove that Errol Spence Jr. wasn't as good as people say he is. He's a good fighter, but he wasn't that. Boom, we move on from there. Terrence becomes undisputed. He calls out Jermell Charlo, who is undisputed at 154, is the next weight class up from 147. Jermell Charlo ends up taking a different fight. He ends up fighting Canelo at 168, and he moonwalked the majority of the fight. He was Michael Jackson the majority of the fight. Thriller, thrill of the night, on his back foot moving around, maybe using a jab here and there. Anyway, Canelo wins that fight, and he wins a bunch of other fights leading up to him fighting Bud. Then we get the Crawford-Canelo fight after Bud takes a year off. The only fight that Terrence had was against Israel Madrimov, who he didn't look that good against. Terrence said he did well, he fought well. And I understand what he's saying. He's saying, I did well against a guy who became very quirky and uncanny during the fight. He didn't fight like he normally does. He switched his style up. He switched up how he does things. And he ended up not fighting the way that he wanted, what Bud had trained for. But Bud ended up going in there and getting a fight. And when you got a guy that's quirky like that, and he becomes what you're looking at is becomes off balance, and he switches up his style on you. You got to make up for that. So of course you're gonna get hit with shots. You're gonna get caught with shots and everything. But you're gonna have to take the fight to a guy like that to make sure that you pull it out. So Terrence wins 7-5, 8-4. People say that wasn't his best performance. Of course it's not. When you got a guy that knows that he don't want to get caught with punches, and he's feinting you, and he's catching you with certain punches, you know you're gonna get hit, and you have to switch up your style to go and get this guy. You have to find out where his timing is. You have to make the adjustments, right? Boom. Terrence is off for the next 13 months, and he gets the Canelo fight, and we get to this fight, right? Canelo with 60-something wins, 30-something knockouts, right? Hell of a guy. He's fought plenty of champions. No matter what you say about his record, people talk about Bud's record and everything. But look, if we gonna dissect people's record, we can dissect Floyd Mayweather's record. Why he 50-0? We can dissect that. He didn't fight Costa Tszyu. He made Juan Manuel Marquez come up to 147 when he was like a 135 fighter, and he fought him at 147, right? We can pick apart his record. We can pick apart his record and say he didn't give Zab Judah a second fight. We can talk about those Maidana fights and say that I don't know if he really won those fights. We can pick apart his record and say Juan Luis Castillo, or was it Jose Luis Castillo? We can pick apart those fights and say he didn't win the first one and he didn't win the second one, or maybe he did win both of them. We can pick apart his record and say that. We can pick apart his record and say that he fought Miguel Cotto after Miguel Cotto had been brutally beaten by guys like Antonio Margarito, and what's my man name, Manny Pacquiao. We can pick apart his record and say that. We can say he fought Shane Mosley when Shane Mosley was 38 years old and he had been beaten by a few guys. We can do that, right? We can do that with Canelo. We can do that with Bud. We can do that with so many fighters. But I don't do that because I'm not the guy that's getting up every day, grinding, boxing, and getting myself in shape to go fight another man who's building up hate in his heart for me and wants to hurt me and possibly kill me. Right? We can pick apart these guys' records and say things about them. We can. But in the end, Canelo fought the guys that he fought. He became undisputed champion at 168. Should he have fought David Benavidez? Yes, absolutely. I would have loved that fight. I would have loved for him to fight David Benavidez before he got out of his prime and started to have a complete decline in his career. I would have loved to have seen that fight, but we didn't get that. We got the Terrence Crawford fight, and that was a fight that Terrence went looking for because he started looking at Canelo and paying attention to how he fights. And he said, "Oh man, I can't beat this guy. I can beat him. Let's make that fight." Boom. Saturday, September 13th, the fight arrives. They both weigh in at 167.5. The night of the fight, I'm home, of course, watching on Netflix like so many other people are doing. And I'm making just as much noise in my place as other people who are watching the fight. And maybe they wasn't making no noise, but I'm in my place clapping, excited because, like I said, from round 1 to round 3, you're going to tell what type of fight it's going to be. Either Terrence is going to engage with him, he's going to box, and he's going to be the boxer-puncher, and he's going to show you his tool set, or he's going to be on his back foot moonwalking, and he's going to be shooting a thriller film while he's in there. A dance recital while he moves away from Canelo. And he didn't. From round 1, he was in Canelo's face using his jab, and using his counter punches, making Canelo turn, keeping him off his right hand as much as he could, making Canelo adjust and pick up his feet. And it was a beautiful exhibition of boxing and counter punching. Canelo wasn't as strong as he was. Canelo was trying to push him around, and Bud was responding by pushing him back when he had the time to, letting Canelo know, you're not about to bully me around in here. You might be wild, but you're not what everybody says you are. Those guys are scared of you, and they scared of getting hit. And Bud wasn't worried about getting hit. Bud was more worried about executing the game plan to neutralize Canelo and win the fight, which he did brilliantly. It was a fight where Canelo didn't look like the guy that everybody was talking about. Yeah. He ain't look too good. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, Bud. Round by round, we saw a beautiful exhibition of boxing. We saw Bud pick the guy apart. We saw Bud make adjustments after getting hit here and there. He was caught with several body shots, but Bud would laugh, would either smile it off, or he would acknowledge and go, "Okay, cool, you got me," or he would say no, as if to say, "No, that didn't hurt," or that wasn't as hard as it could have been. In any event, anytime you get hit at certain points and you shake your head, it's either you're acknowledging that you did get hit, or you saying to yourself, "No, I wasn't supposed to get hit by that." Through the course of the fight, I think we get about to round 7, round 8, you start seeing the change in frustration in Canelo, right? You start seeing how Canelo is frustrated, and he starts to turn away or get upset during the course of the fight when he's getting hit with the same jab. Or he starts to get hit with a left hand straight on, or he gets hit with counter punches, or he can't even win the fight on the inside, in the clinch when they dirty box. And you start noticing the change, and then he starts looking away out into the crowd, and you just see the frustration in his face. And you go, oh shit, this is the defining moment right here. So either he's gonna have to come forward and dive on his sword, or Bud gonna have to go give him the sword and cut his throat his damn self. And even though that's what we wanted, we didn't see that completely, because Bud, making sure that he win, he kept boxing. Beautiful, masterful performance, which I love. I have no problem with Bud doing that. I have no problem with Bud staying behind his jab and continuing to turn Canelo and just win a fight in a masterful way, which he did. It would have been nice to see him go for a knockout, but that's not what he did. He stayed behind his jab. But later in those rounds, if you were watching, Bud did pick it up. He went to the inside to show, hey, I'm not just going to box you, but I'm going to beat you up, man. I got to make sure I get these rounds. And he did. He put on a great performance. He beat an all-time great fighter. Canelo started at 154. Oh no, he started at 147. Canelo started at 147. You know, the weight was hard for him. So he moved up to 154 and he became a really great guy at 154. A really good fighter. And he got called out by plenty of guys. He got called out by the Charlos of the world at the time. He got called out by the Boo Boo Andres at the time, who didn't get the fight. Wish they should have. I wish they would have got that fight at 154 or 160. None of those guys got those fights, which sucked because I wanted to see what it would look like for Canelo against those type of guys, especially once he would have fought the big Charlo, Jamal. I believe that Jamal would have gave him a severe beating behind a great jab and good boxing. I also believe that Canelo would have had to take an L against Demetrius Andrade at that weight at 150 or 154 or 168 because he's a great boxer too and he's a southpaw. But those are guys I believe that would have handed him an L. And for some reason, he never took those fights. He ended up fighting James Kirkland and a bunch of other guys that we did not want to see him fight along the way. And then he ends up moving up to 160. He fights Golovkin. They had a trilogy, right? He ended up fighting Miguel Cotto. As Miguel Cotto was winding down on his career. And he fought a bunch of other guys. But moving up to that 168, he fought all the champions. But he didn't fight David Benavidez when David Benavidez had the belt or when David Benavidez was the number one fighter for the belt. He was the number one challenger. Canelo ended up fighting what they call his European run. He went and fought Callum Smith. He went and fought Billy Joe Saunders. He went and fought, what's the guy from Albania or something like that. He went and fought a bunch of guys like that. And he took their belts from him, you know, but rightfully so. Rightfully so. He was able to get those all 4 belts. He became a middleweight champion, the super middleweight champion. But September 13th, 2025, we saw Canelo Alvarez, who was like the kingpin of boxing, who was the current kingpin of boxing, the moneymaker, the cash cow. We saw him take a L against a superior boxer, a guy with a deep tool set. I'm happy. I'm happy with the result. If I were a betting man, I would have won a lot of money. I think. I don't know. I don't really bet. I don't know the odds or anything like that. But if I were to put my money up against the people that I know, I would have got that. I would have got that bread. You understand? Because I was going for Crawford no matter what. And again, like I said, when you got a deep toolbox like that, you can box, you can bang, you can counterpunch. You know the ins and outs of the ring. You know the techniques and the sequences, and you know how to do all of it and put it all together. You're gonna put yourself in a better position than anybody else will, and that's one of the things that Bud was able to do, and it worked very well. It worked very well for him that night. And I'm proud of Bud. I'm proud of Bud for being a family man that he is, for giving back to his community, for being a responsible guy, for being disciplined, for raising his family the way he is, for being an all around good dude, for being a gentleman, you know, and a gangster at times when he has to, you know, and he puts it together well. And we see it. We see it in his everyday. He's not loud. He's not boisterous. You don't ever hear any smut on his name, anything too bad going on. Anything that we hear about his family and friends, I already know what's going on. We just hear about it later on. So if we're shocked about it, they probably already know what the fuck is going on. So we're looking at a living legend. He wins the fight, 12-round scrap, beats Canelo up to the inside, the outside, everywhere, every which way. Now, one thing he didn't do was even though he put on a masterful performance, he didn't sit down on his punches a lot, and that's mainly because you ain't trying to get caught by Canelo. Let's be honest. Like we ain't got to be stupid. We understand that Canelo is a hard puncher, and he's very good at hitting you with accurate shots with his left hook and his right hand. And if he starts to get those shots off, he becomes comfortable. And not only does he becomes comfortable, your confidence goes down because you're getting hit. And when you're getting hit and flush like that, you start wanting to move because those punches will shock you. You know, they'll do more than sting. They'll shock you, and they'll make you think about, oh, I don't know if I want to be doing this. And because when they shock you, when the punches shock you, you tend to not move because you're like, yo, what the fuck was that? And then you have to pick your feet up. But by the time you pick your feet up, he's closing in, right? He's closing the gap. So, but we did see when Canelo got hit with that uppercut or that left hand, we seen a shot. We seen him sit there and go, oh shit, I got hit with that. Wait, am I still moving? And or he would just acknowledge it like, God damn it, he did hit me. So we seen Bud Crawford win the rounds and win the sequences of the fight, and he did a great job. And we seen Canelo gracefully speak on how well his opponent was, which was Bud Crawford. We seen Canelo speak and say, hey, I lost to a better man tonight. And he even said in the post press conference, hey, look, the guy was better than Floyd Mayweather. He was way better than Floyd Mayweather. And I appreciate him acknowledging that. He did something that he didn't have to do, but he did it, and he showed love to Bud at the end of the fight. If you saw the post press conference, Bud came out with his belts, and he gave them back to Canelo. He shook his hand a couple times, and they said thank you, and I appreciate you, and I respect you. And they showed each other love, like warriors do, like men do. And Terrence went back to his dressing room to wait for his chance to talk. So it was a beautiful night. I'm very happy with the result. I'm happy that Bud Crawford was able to successfully get the titles from Canelo at 168 and become undisputed in 3 weight classes. The only man to do it, I believe. In the 4-belt era, he's the only man to do it. Clarissa Shields, of course, she's done it in 3 or 4 weight classes as undisputed. So she's been doing her thing. And of course, she was pulling for Bud because that's her motherfucking guy. That's like a brother to her. So there you have it. And we also will have another good boxer coming up. I would like to see Shakur Stevenson, who's like a little brother to Bud. I would like to see him fight the good fighters that are out there. The Teofimos, the Tank Davises, the Devin Haney's. I would like to see him fight these guys. The Ryan Garcias. I would like to see him fight these guys. Stop wasting all this talent, man. Stop being scared and get in there and mix it up. That's what y'all training for. Some of these guys really are just training to fight the best fights or the money fights. They ain't fighting to fight the best fighters. They're fighting for money. That's what they're fighting for. So whoever is the biggest name out there, the biggest draw, that's who they want to fight against. So I'm going to end it right there, and I'm saying, man, I'm God bless Bud Crawford and his family. God bless everybody that's actually listening to this episode. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and sharing the podcast, man. It's a beautiful weekend, and we're going to open up the week, start the week off right. We're going to get up, go to work, have a great day, have a great week, and we're going to be around some beautiful people, and we're going to do what we supposed to. Y'all stay hydrated, stay alert, stay aware, stay blessed. I'm out.